the fans are feeling super cocky about the Gamecocks. That's why we're going to talk about them today because they're a team that was just on the precipice of a college football playoff last year. I mean, literally, you could point to like two different plays that happened last season during the regular season for South Carolina, and had they gone differently, South Carolina is one of those 12 teams in the college football playoff. So, with that being said, and really, honestly, the schedules being very similar to what they were last year in the SEC, right? You're just swapping home and away as far as conference games go. And we all know about the non-conference game every year against Clemson at the end. It's a tough schedule, again, Mason. And so we're going to break down the schedule here in a minute. But we wanted to talk about some things that we're hearing in the spring, right? And just kind of talk about some guys that are on the rise. And at the same time, I also want to mention some of the guys that are returning that are obviously very, very important, to their team. And South Carolina has got some of those guys. Look, let's start off with the big guy on campus, right? Lenora Sellers. Okay, this is obviously your biggest returner on the team, most important position on the field, quarterback. As well as Lenora Sellers did last year, it's crazy to say there's so much room for improvement for him, dude. There is
Totally.
so much room for improvement. And he was such a playmaker last year and put the team on his back when he had to do it. And just very impressive. I'll be the first one to admit, Mason, when we started the season off last year, you remember, I was like, this guy's not an SEC quarterback. I said it. You can go back and watch it. I don't lie. I ain't going to lie. I'm wrong all the time, and I come right back here on the channel. But Lenoris is an SEC quarterback, and he's going to be a doggone good one. What do you think about Lenoris coming back? And, you can kind of take us into some of the players that you're hearing some buzz about here in the spring. But, of course, Lenoris is one of those.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a guy who could realistically be on a short list of a Heisman watch, and I don't think that we're hyping that up too much.
Yeah.
I have some concern about him just kind of staying where he's at, but I think if that were the case, I think if this were a player, a quarterback who's not going to progress, we would have seen that last year. We would. This guy was the best quarterback in college football in November, and you can't tell me otherwise. I think he was.
Yeah.
I really think he was the best quarterback in November. It's a shame that the Gamecocks couldn't make it to the playoffs because I think that they could have done some damage. We were on the cock train for the last month of the season there, and things just didn't quite pan out. But as far as a program goes, they've really got a program headed in the right direction under Shane Beamer, and now with a quarterback who was not that highly touted coming out of high school. I think he was a guy who created some buzz in his senior year and kind of got some momentum going. Started seeing some offers come in and has really made a name for himself in the SEC. Um,
Yeah.
a quarterback like this though is nothing without his receivers. We saw it last year where there really wasn't that guy that he could rely on to pass the football to. And you saw Sellers with his legs do some tremendous things. This year, I want to see Jared Brown be more involved. He was good last year. I want to see him be a little bit more involved. I want to see Matteo Bennett be more involved. But obviously, the player that most fans are excited for is Nick Harbor. And this is a guy who is an absolute freak athlete, not telling you guys anything new. He could realistically be one of from a talent perspective, he could be one of the best receivers to ever play football. Like the guy is really that physically gifted. And what I've found out this offseason is that he's no longer running track. This is the first offseason that he's not had to double duties with track and football. So how does that spill out onto the field with him having a full spring practice, not running track, focusing solely on football? I think
Yeah.
that could be huge for the Gamecocks this year, and not to mention all the freshman wide receivers that they brought in. Lex Cyrus, Malik Clark. You're looking to get a little bit of production out of Donovan Murph. Maybe Jaden Sellers is able to place to make some plays for this team as well. I'm if I had to circle a position group on this entire team that I'm hoping gets better, I think is going to get better, it's going to be the wide receiving room and the pass catchers in general.
Going to be a lot of heavy duty, right, on those top three guys that you were talking about there: Nick Harbor, Jared Brown, um, Bennett. A lot of pressure on those guys, right? And you can't really afford a ton of injuries, especially early in the season, because some of those guys you were naming, like Malik Clark, Brian Rowe, Lex Cyrus, Jaden Sellers, those guys are green. I mean, they're green as a dollar bill. So if you're going to have an injury later in the season, I think would be a whole lot better than early on in the season, where you got to throw one of those guys into a situation where he literally is trial by fire,
Yeah. Can you get one or two of those freshmen? I mean, can you hit on one or two of them? Like, I think you've got five there. I don't think it's unrealistic to ask that two of them, kind of pop off this year and end up with 4 or more touchdowns, 500 or more yards. I think that's pretty reasonable to expect.
Yeah. Well, so, we were kind of talking about some guys that are popping in spring, and you can't really listen to anything about South Carolina football without hearing about Rashul Faison, the transfer running back coming in, and it kind of leads me to my next point. I feel like that was a very, very important pickup, and I think it's very important that South Carolina hits on that pickup with the exit of Rocket Sanders, who I think was a pleasant surprise for most people last year. I thought he played. The expectations had gotten lowered in 23 with him a little bit. People thought he was a little slow. His first step was a little slow. Rocket Sanders played well, and now you've got to figure out how to establish a run game without running the quarterback so much. I think you've got to have some continuity in the backfield there with Lenoris Sellers and not have to rely on him to tote the rock a whole heck of a lot. Rashul Faison, I'm looking at some of his stats now from Utah State, 198 carries last year, 1,109 yards. That's good for 5.6 yards a carry. So doing it at Utah State and doing it against the schedule that we're going to kind of talk about here in a minute, they're two totally different things, but I like where South Carolina's head's at as far as bringing in a running back to help out there in that room. And speaking of the run game, the offensive line last year was absolutely piss poor to start the season. I don't know any way to say that. And they grew. I thought they grew. They got better and better, and also Lenoris had a better idea of what he was wanting to do, and his internal timer seemed to shorten as the season went on, and he knew, okay, 1, 2, 3, I got to get out of here, right? And once they started doing that, I felt like the offensive line kind of grew into themselves and got some confidence. And from everything that I'm hearing, the offensive line should be better, if not flat out decent, this season.
Yeah.
They're big. They're averaging 325 pounds a player on the line, and look, I mean, most SEC teams are, right, but those are some big guys, and I think that you feel a little bit better on the ends. You go in the transfer portal and you really tackle the center position with Boaz Stanley. Apparently, there's a lot of confidence with him, and you bring in a backup for him, Rodney Newsome. So I think this will be a better offensive line. Therefore, I think the ground game is going to get better by using the running back. I'm not sure that the total rushing yards will be better or the averages or whatever, but I think you're going to be able to keep Lenoris in the pocket, let him work, let him cook, and don't rely on him to take off whenever your first and second read is breaking down, but still have a run game with the running back. And I think that's super important. Obviously, it's important to be able to have balance against some of the really good defenses that this team is going to go against this year. What do you think? What else on the offense, Mason? I mean, we can kind of talk about some freshmen that we're looking to step up. You've already kind of mentioned some. What else you got? We didn't even mention Air Nolan coming in, and he's going to be your backup. So what better situation could you possibly ask for? Because Air Nolan, we all saw him in the spring game, with Ohio State or one of the scrimmages, whatever it was. He's not ready. And he knows that, and he came to a spot where he can sit in the background and learn. Who better to learn from than one of the guys who I think is going to end up being one of the better quarterbacks in South Carolina history, personally. What a great situation for him. What else do you think about the offense, man?
Yeah, I think one of the themes that I really want to touch on. Not to be a Debbie Downer here or anything like that. It's spring football, right? Where everybody's
Yeah.
got a chance, right? That's
Hmm.
kind of the beauty of college football, and I think that I don't say that tongue in cheek. I really feel like South Carolina's got a chance, but I'm a little bit concerned about the depth along the offensive line, um, at the running back position, at wide receiver. We mentioned having some of those freshmen step up is going to be key here. At quarterback, I feel pretty comfortable with Aaron Nolan. You don't know what you have in him necessarily, but we know that he's another guy similar to Lenora Sellers who has a lot of potential, but maybe halfway through the season, or may just need to get some starts under his belt for him to realize that potential. But yeah, to me, just that's one thing that really stood out looking at this offense was there's just not a ton of depth. Now, we also said the same thing about the defense going into last season, and that wasn't the case. The defense had depth. The defense on the defensive line, especially, had
It
a
was,
ton of depth. So
yeah.
you never know. This team's developing really well. So we'll have to wait and see kind of who steps up and who are the guys that we're talking about in November that we're not talking about today, because I'm sure there will be one or two.
You had mentioned the defense. Let's kind of scoot over to that. The obvious, the obvious uh, uh, pluses that you have on the defensive side of the ball. Dylan Stewart's back. Obviously, very young, very talented guy last year. Caught a lot of people's eye. Caught my eye. I am very impressed with Dylan Stewart and the speed rush. I'm interested to see how he can be more versatile in his game. I think that's he's got he's got he's got a couple really good moves, and I suspect that he's going to be improving on that and adding to his arsenal this season. But you've got Jalen Kilgore at the nickelback. He's going to be back. DQ Smith, who was a stud back there in the secondary, he's going to be back. So you have leaders that have been there and done that on all three levels of the defense. And I think that's worth being said. I think that that's worth something. You've got guys in each pocket there that know what's going on. The biggest question, though, Mason, is going to be the interior of the defensive line and linebacker, because you lose some absolute studs on the interior of that D line, and you're really going to be relying on Fred Johnson to step up at linebacker. And from everything that I'm hearing in spring, he is stepping up. But you cannot really, on the defensive side of the ball, put somebody in a tougher situation than linebacker in the SEC when you don't have a lot of experience. It's one of the hardest positions to play. It doesn't matter if you're 5-star, 4-star. It's flat out hard, and it takes reps. We watched some of the best guys in the NFL. Roquan Smith, his first year, man, he didn't play very well, right? Talking about a Georgia guy there. But we're just going to have to wait and see on this linebacker room. But Fred Johnson is one of those guys that I am hearing about, and he is creating some buzz. So I think that is a good sign for what I thought was a good defense last year. But you've got transfers all over that defensive line, Mason. They're all going to have to step up. What's some stuff that you're hearing about spring ball scrimmages, things like that, and some freshmen that are hot, and some guys that are getting ready to step it up? I like some of the leaders coming back, but you got some serious holes that you're going to have to fill. Like we said, interior D line and linebacker is what I'm seeing.
Yeah, I haven't heard much about any freshmen making huge impacts other
Yeah.
than Donovan Darden. Donovan Darden at the middle linebacker position, like you were talking about, he's definitely in the mix. This is a group that needed an uplift. Fred Johnson is probably going to step in here and be someone who provides a lot of that. Also, Justin Okoronkwo, guy comes over from Germany, and I mean, immediately is able to make a name for himself over at Alabama. And now he's transferred over to South Carolina. It sounds like he's really playing well and could be one of those diamonds in the rough that actually hits and is a starter for South Carolina. It seems like he's kind of playing himself into that role as of right now. Sean Murphy, another transfer who they expect to get some playing time and get some production out of him. Jaron Willis is a guy who could be a starter when it's all said and done. So you've got about 5 pieces here who I would say are kind of all jockeying for position. And that's what you want. You want that competition in the middle linebacker room, just all over the football field. But I think that they're going to be okay at linebacker. I don't know if this is a great unit. It's probably the worst unit on the team. If I had to say, pick a unit right now, I would probably go with little middle linebacker. I'm concerned about the defensive line, and not in a sense that I don't think they're going to be very good, but they were outstanding last year. They were
Mm-hmm.
one of the best in the country. You lose Kyle Kennard, you lose Tonka Hemingway, you lose T.J. Sanders, DeAndre Jules. I mean, there's a lot of pieces who are missing off of this defensive line, and how do you replace? You bring in, like you said, you bring in some transfers. Um, you still have Dylan Stewart there, but Dylan Stewart really benefited from having Kyle Kennard playing opposite of him. Dylan Stewart's going to get all the attention now on the defensive
Yep.
line. What does he do? What is he going to do? He's a little bit undersized. How is he going to react to being double teamed? We haven't seen it. So what you have to do is get a lot out of Brian Thomas playing opposite of Dylan Stewart, and hope that he's able to be a disruptor. And if he's
Mm-hmm.
not, one player I really like as a transfer who's kind of flown under the radar. He's a Missouri transfer, but Jalen Brown. Saw this guy a little bit for Missouri last year. He kind of came in some garbage time. He ended up redshirting, so he's a redshirt freshman. But similar to Dylan Stewart, 6'6", kind of a long, lean body type. And I think that he could potentially be a guy who, I'm not like circling him or anything like that, but he's one that I've got my eye on, and somebody who I think could really benefit from playing in this system and under this defense. And then, you look at the secondary. I really like what they've got in the safety positions. Love Jalen Kilgore. DQ Smith, I think, plays really well. Really like Peyton Williams. And then you look at cornerback, and you've got a competition going on at the left cornerback spot between Miles Norwood and Brandon Sisse. I'm not sure how you pronounce that. And then you've got Judge Collier and Vicari Swain on the other side. It seems like
Mm-hmm.
Collier's kind of locked that spot up, but who's going to win between those transfers at the left cornerback slot? That's a little bit of a question for me, but ultimately you've got some real safeties back there, and you saw them making some plays last year, getting some interceptions, batting some balls down. They played well above what we thought they would be going into the season, and really between them and the defensive line, it was a terror. They were a terror against other offenses throughout the year, and I expect that to continue. But we don't have the proven commodities that we had last year. That was kind of a one and done for a lot of those players. What's going to happen this year? We'll have to wait and see. But I think the pieces are there, and I do think that they have more depth on the defensive side of the football than they do the offensive side. So maybe there's a little bit more to choose from when it comes to the defense.
Yeah. Look, I think you nailed it there. You got to hit on these transfer defensive tackles because I mean, we all know what it is in the SEC. If your defensive line can create some type of crush there in the middle, it helps everybody. It keeps the linebackers free. The secondary doesn't have to, hold ground for so long. I'm hearing good things about Xavier Hardy,
Mm-hmm.
and apparently he was a highly touted guy, and I'm hearing good things. That's again a very very difficult position to play in the SEC. Got to have a lot of God given talent, right? I mean, it's not just sharpening your sword. I mean, you've got to be a huge dude. You've got to have a hell of a motor to be able to do it successfully in one of the best conferences in the country, if not the best. Um, I was pleasantly surprised with this defense last year. We'll see what happens. We've got some. We got a couple of really, really good offenses on the schedule. So let's kind of go through the schedule here for a minute for 2025. Going to open up in the bins against Virginia Tech. So that's going to be a very interesting game. Now, should South Carolina win that game? Yes. South Carolina will probably be favored by 9 or 10, I would figure. Probably 9. I wouldn't think the full 10, but and if it's 9, I'm betting South Carolina. So I like South Carolina there, but that'll be a neutral site there in the Benz on August 31st. South Carolina State, no problem. Vandy is going to be on the 13th of September, and that's going to be at home. Then you finally go on the road week 4 on September 20th at Mizzou. At Mizzou, there's a lot of changes that have went on over at Mizzou, right? As far as their offense and things like that. Um, I'm not. I'm feeling like South Carolina's defense is going to be able to hold their own in that one. And look, I'm in my head. I'm already considering that South Carolina is going to be able to run their offensive program on most teams. Now, I'm not saying they're going to score 40 points every game, but with Lenoris there, and the way he runs, and Nick Harbor, the way he kind of broke out of his shell, it felt like last year, especially towards the end of the season. Um, my concern is more on the defensive side of the ball, so that's kind of what I'm focusing on when I'm looking at the schedule. But the 27th of September, going to be in Kentucky. Well, nobody really knows what Kentucky's offense is going to look like because it looked like if it looks anything like last year, the defense will be fine. Kentucky did not have an offense last year, although they were pretty strong defensively. And then here comes the gauntlet, man, at LSU. That's a game I'm really worried about, brother. But and I'll tell you why. It's not South Carolina's offense I'm worried about. It's their defense. And I'll throw a little grain of salt in there, though, man. I'm worried about every defense that's going against LSU this year. They're stacked on offense. If their offensive line can play decent ball, they're going to be really tough to deal with. They've got 6 wide receivers that a lot of people would die to have. I mean, they're just loaded. So that's going to be a big test for the South Carolina secondary in that game. So you've got a few weeks, I feel like, to iron some things out. And there's going to be some mistakes along the way. But that game right there, you got to come with your A game defensively. Oklahoma at home on the 18th of October. Alabama at home on the 25th of October. At Ole Miss. At Texas A&M on November 15th there. Coastal. And then you get Clemson at home. So I got some stars next to these: LSU, Alabama, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, and Clemson. Those games make or break your season, brother. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them if you include Mizzou. I put a star by Mizzou's name, but I don't know what they'll be. But if you can win 3 out of 6 of those, I think South Carolina is going to be right there knocking on the door again for the college football playoff. But you're going to have to win all the ones you're supposed to, and 3 of those, what I would consider to be toss-up games or possibly even underdog games, especially considering some of those are on the road. Going to depend on Ole Miss, going to depend on Texas A&M, but I feel like both of those teams are heading in the right direction. Ole Miss seems to have the tires run flat on them at the end of the season, so we'll see what they are by that point in November. What are your thoughts on this schedule, man? I mean, it's a tough one. South Carolina, when the SEC divided up, they were like, yes, no more Georgia for a little while. It didn't matter. This thing's just as hard. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just as hard as it's ever been. But, man, it makes for some entertaining television. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I think coming off of last season, you look at this schedule, and as tough as it is very tough. There's not a game on here that I look at and go, well, South Carolina can't win that, right? Going into last season, there were a lot of, no, they can't win that. There were a lot of that. There was a lot of that talk. Alabama was one, and they should have won that game. Um, LSU was one, and they should have won that game.
Yep.
So I think that's the difference. When I look at this schedule, it's very similar to what it looked like last year. But when I look at it this year, I don't see a for sure loss. And that just speaks to where this program is at, where the trajectory that Shane Beamer has this program on. I really can't say enough about it. But when I look at this schedule, I'm just kind of like an early glance at it. We haven't done an LSU breakdown yet. We haven't done a Missouri breakdown yet, or Oklahoma, Alabama. Like we're still early in this as far as our breakdowns. But based on what I know, I feel like this is very realistically a 9-3 team, and potentially a 10-2. I think 11-1 is probably a little bit of a stretch, just given the parity in the SEC right now. But if you told me that South Carolina was 11-1 at the end of this year, I wouldn't call you crazy, right? I would call you a fan, fanatical for your Gamecocks, and there's nothing wrong with that, especially in the spring. So yeah, I'm looking at this schedule. I like where the Gamecocks are at right now, and I think 9-3, 10-2 is probably where this team ends up.
Absolutely. Hey, and if you're a South Carolina fan, come back and join us here on the First and Long College Football Show. As Mason said, we're going to be doing deep dives, breakdowns after all the spring, games, or if you're having a spring game. There's a lot of teams that aren't even having one this year, but they're still going to have scrimmages. We're still going to have all the, the murmurs going on about what's going on at spring camp, and we're going to be here from now all the way into September.